The sweetness of freshly brewed tea filled the air of the small cafe in the heart of New York. Harper walked in, her green eyes scanning the cozy space for an empty table. She found one in the corner, next to the small stage where a young musician was tuning his guitar. She settled in, ordered a cappuccino, and opened her laptop, ready for another afternoon of work on her design project. The first soft notes of the guitar filled the space, and Harper looked up from her screen. The musician, with his dark skin and deep-set eyes, strummed the strings with mesmerizing delicacy. His voice, when he began to sing, was rich and velvety, enveloping Harper in a web of emotions she couldn't explain. Kian, the talented musician, noticed the brown-haired girl's gaze and shy smile. Their gazes met, and for a brief moment, the world around them seemed to disappear. Harper felt her heart racing, a sensation she hadn't experienced for a long time. At the end of the performance, Kian gathered his courage and approached Harper's table. "Did you enjoy the show?" he asked with a warm smile. "It was incredible," Harper replied, her voice betraying a slight tremor of nervousness. "You have an extraordinary talent." The conversation flowed naturally, as if they were old friends meeting again. They talked about music, art, their aspirations and dreams. The hours passed unnoticed, and as the cafe began to close, they both realized that they didn't want that moment to end. "Can I see you again?" Kian asked, his voice full of hope. Harper smiled, feeling a wave of happiness run through her body. "I'd love to." In the weeks that followed, Harper and Kian met up frequently. Walks through Central Park, visits to art galleries, evenings attending jazz performances in hidden clubs around the city. Every moment together only strengthened the connection they felt, a magnetic attraction that went beyond physical appearance or cultural differences. It was on a starry night with the city sparkling in the background that Kian held Harper's hands and said the words she had longed to hear. "I love you, Harper. You're the song that was missing from my life." Harper felt tears of happiness welling up in her eyes. "I love you too, Kian. You brought color and melody into my world." The kiss that followed was soft and passionate, sealing a love they both knew to be true and deep. However, it was all smooth sailing for Harper and Kian. The young woman knew she had to present her love to her parents, Bennett and Rosalind, a traditional and conservative couple from the Upper East Side. Harper feared their reaction, but knew she couldn't hide her happiness. One Friday evening, Harper invited Kian to dinner at her parents' house. Their nervousness was palpable as they walked up the steps of the elegant home. "It's going to be okay," Kian whispered, gently squeezing Harper's hand. The door opened, revealing Rosalind, a middle-aged woman with perfectly groomed gray hair and a forced smile on her lips. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of Kian, but she kept her composure. "Harper, darling, and you must be Kian, aren't you?" The hesitation in her voice was evident. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Thompson," Kian replied politely, extending his hand. Rosalind hesitated for a moment before accepting it, her handshake weak and quick. Bennett appeared right behind her, his countenance serious and appraising. "So, is this the musician you've been talking about so much, Harper?" Bennett's tone of voice carried a mixture of disapproval and skepticism that made Harper's stomach churn. The dinner that followed was a succession of tense moments and uncomfortable silences. Bennett and Rosalind asked questions that were more like an interrogation, questioning Kian's intentions, his career as a musician, his family. "What about your parents, Kian?" "What do they do?" asked Bennett, his tone bordering on disdain. Kian answered calmly and with dignity. "My father is a university professor of literature and my mother is a nurse. They taught me the value of education and hard work." Harper watched, her heart clenching as her parents exchanged meaningful glances. She could feel the prejudice hanging in the air, unspoken but clearly present. When dinner was finally over, Harper and Kian said a quick goodbye. As soon as the door closed behind them, Harper let out a shaky sigh. "I'm sorry about that, Kian. I didn't expect it to be so tense," Kian added, a sad smile on his lips. "Don't worry, Harper. It's not the first time I've faced something like this, and it probably won't be the last." Harper's heart broke when she heard those words. She hugged Kian tightly, determined to protect her love against any adversity. In the days that followed, Harper tried to talk to her parents, to explain how much Kian meant to her, but was met with resistance and empty arguments about cultural differences and worries about the future. "He's a musician, Harper," Bennett argued. "What kind of stable life can he offer you?" "Love is measured by bank account, Dad," Harper retorted, frustrated. "Kian is talented, dedicated, and makes me happy. Isn't that enough for you?" Rosalind, for her part, tried a more subtle but equally painful approach. "Darling, have you thought about the difficulties you would face in society with your children?" Harper felt anger and disappointment growing inside her. "Mom, this is the 21st century. Love is love, regardless of skin color." The arguments became frequent, creating a barrier between Harper and her parents. She found herself torn between the love she felt for Kian and the desire for her family's approval. One night, after another heated argument with her parents, Harper found Kian in their small apartment. Tears streamed down her face as she vented her frustration and pain. Kian hugged her, his presence a safe haven in the midst of the emotional storm. "Harper, I love you more than anything, but I don't want to be the cause of a rift between you and your family." Harper pulled away, looking into Kian's eyes with determination. "You're not the cause, Kian. Their prejudice is, and I'm not giving up on our love because of it." Kian held Harper's face between his hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "Then we'll fight together. It won't be easy, but if we're united, we can overcome any obstacle." That night, holding each other close, Harper and Kian made a silent promise. Their love would be stronger than any prejudice, deeper than any difference. They would face the world together, note for note, day after day, building their own symphony of love and acceptance. The first chapter of their story was just beginning, and although the challenges were many, the melody of their united hearts promised a beautiful song for the future. The soft sound of the saxophone filled the muggy air of the small bar on the Lower East Side. Kian, with his eyes closed and his fingers dancing deftly over the piano keys, was lost in the melody he was creating. The audience, although small, was mesmerized by the performance. When the last note echoed through the room, there was a moment of reverent silence before the applause erupted. Harper, sitting at a table near the stage, couldn't contain her proud smile. Her eyes shone with admiration as she watched Kian thank the audience. He came down from the stage, addressing her directly. "You looked amazing," Harper whispered, kissing him softly. Kian smiled, but Harper noticed a shadow of concern in his eyes. "Thanks, love, but I don't know how long I can go on like this. These small bars barely pay the bills." Harper squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of the unspoken words. She knew Kian was too talented to be stuck performing in obscure bars, but she was also aware of the challenges he faced as a black musician in an industry still marked by prejudice. "Your time will come, Kian," she assured him, her voice firm with conviction. "Your talent is undeniable. Someone important will notice, I'm sure." Kian nodded, grateful for Harper's constant support. Together they left the bar, walking hand in hand through the bustling streets of New York. The night air carried promises and dreams, but also the weight of unfulfilled expectations. In the days that followed, Kian continued his relentless pursuit of bigger opportunities. He sent demos to record labels, attended auditions and networking events, always hoping that his big break was just around the corner. One particularly frustrating afternoon, after receiving yet another rejection from a major label, Kian vented to Harper in their small apartment. "Sometimes I feel like I'm swimming against the current," he admitted, his voice heavy with discouragement. "No matter how hard I try, there always seems to be an invisible barrier holding me back." Harper sat down next to him on the worn sofa, wrapping him in a comforting hug. "I know it's hard, my love, but you can't give up. Your music has the power to touch people, to change lives. The world needs to hear what you have to say." Kian absorbed Harper's words, letting them calm his restless soul. He knew she was right. Music was more than a career for him. It was his voice, his way of expressing himself and connecting with the world. "You're right," he finally said, a renewed sparkle in his eyes. "I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep fighting, note by note, until my music is heard." The universe, as if responding to his renewed determination, decided to intervene. On an ordinary night, at yet another gig in a jazz club, Kian didn't know that among the audience was someone who would change the course of his career. Marcus Holloway, a respected music producer known for discovering new talent, happened to be in the club. As soon as Kian started playing, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced for years. That raw emotion, that visceral connection with the music that only true artists can provoke. After the performance, Marcus approached Kian, who was putting away his instruments. "That was an extraordinary performance," Marcus said, holding out his hand. "Marcus Holloway, from Horizon Records." Kian felt his heart race as he recognized the name. "Kian Johnson. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Holloway." "It's my pleasure, Kian. Your music, there's something special about it, an authenticity that is rare to find these days." Marcus paused, his eyes assessing Kian. "I'd like to talk about the possibility of working together. How about coffee tomorrow?" Kian could hardly believe what he was hearing. "That would be amazing, Mr. Holloway. Thank you for the opportunity." Meanwhile, Harper was facing her own challenges at work. As a designer at a renowned advertising agency, she hoped that her talent and dedication would be enough to guarantee her success. However, she discovered that prejudice could manifest itself in subtle and painful ways. At a team meeting, Harper presented her ideas for a new campaign. His concept was innovative and in line with market trends. However, at the end of her presentation, she was met with skeptical looks and veiled comments. "Interesting approach, Harper," said her supervisor, Thomas, with a condescending smile. "But don't you think it's a bit too bold for our more traditional clients?" Harper felt her stomach sink. She knew that daring was just a euphemism for too different. "I believe that our job is precisely to challenge the status quo, to present new perspectives," Harper argued, keeping her composure. "That's what keeps us relevant in the market." Some colleagues nodded in agreement, but Harper could feel the judgmental looks from others. She knew that part of this skepticism wasn't just about her ideas, but also about who she was and who she chose to marry. After the meeting, Harper overheard two colleagues talking quietly near the water cooler. "Did you see her engagement ring? I bet her musician husband bought it," one of them said dismissively. "Yeah, she could have done a lot better. But some people prefer to try different things, if you know what I mean," the other replied, laughing. Harper felt the blood boil in her veins. She wanted to confront them, to expose their petty prejudice, but she knew that would only make their situation worse. Instead, she channeled her anger and frustration into her work. Over the next few weeks, Harper devoted herself entirely to the campaign project. Sleepless nights, extensive research, endless revisions. She was determined to prove her worth, not just to herself, but to everyone who doubted her. When she finally presented the final version of the campaign, even the most skeptical had to admit it was brilliant. Harper's approach was not only innovative, but also perfectly aligned with the brand's values and the expectations of the target audience. Thomas, her supervisor, couldn't contain his enthusiasm. "Harper, this is exceptional. You've exceeded all expectations. I'm really impressed." The client loved the campaign, and Harper felt a wave of pride and relief run through her body. She had proved her worth, not through words, but through actions and concrete results. That evening, Harper and Kian met to celebrate their respective victories. Kian shared the news about his meeting with Marcus Holloway, and Harper told them about the success of her campaign. Sitting on a bench in Central Park, under the starry New York sky, they reflected on the challenges they faced and the victories they won. "You know," Kian said, holding Harper's hand, "sometimes I think we're like two different notes in the same melody. Separately, we're beautiful, but together, we create something truly extraordinary." Harper smiled, leaning against Kian's shoulder. "And this melody has only just begun, my love. We have so much more music to create together." As the city pulsed around them, Harper and Kian savored that moment of peace and fulfillment. The challenges would continue, the obstacles would stand in their way. But together, they were ready to face any storm, composing their own symphony of love, respect, and overcoming. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of Kian's small apartment, gently illuminating Harper's sleeping face. She opened her eyes slowly, a smile forming on her lips as she saw Kian sitting on the edge of the bed, guitar in hand, strumming a soft melody. "Good morning, my love," he whispered, leaning in to kiss her. "I have a surprise for you." Harper sat up, curious. Kian began to play, his rich, emotional voice filling the room with a song that spoke of love, overcoming, and hope. It was the song he had written for her, the song that would mark the beginning of a new phase in their lives. "It's beautiful, Kian," Harper said, thrilled. "Are you going to play it at the concert tonight?" Kian nodded, a glint of excitement in his eyes. "Marcus thinks this song could be my big moment. He's invited some executives from the record company to watch the show." Harper's heart raced at the news. Ever since Marcus Holloway had discovered Kian in that little jazz club, things had started to change. Rehearsals, recording sessions, endless meetings. It was exhausting, but Kian was finally getting the chance he deserved. That night, the Blue Note Jazz Club was packed. Harper, sitting at a table near the stage, could feel the electricity in the air. When Kian took to the stage, there was a moment of expectant silence before he began to play. The first notes of his new song filled the room, and Harper saw the eyes of the record company executives widen with interest. Kian's voice, charged with emotion and authenticity, touched each person in the audience in a unique way. When the last note faded into the air, there was a moment of reverent silence before the audience erupted into applause. Harper saw Marcus Holloway approach the executives, animated gestures and wide smiles indicating that something important was happening. After the show, Kian met Harper backstage, his eyes shining with excitement. "They loved it, Harper. The record company wants to sign me. I'm going to record an album." Harper hugged him tightly, tears of joy streaming down her face. "I knew you'd make it, my love. Your talent is undeniable." In the months that followed, Kian's life was transformed. Recordings, interviews, photo shoots. His first single was released and quickly climbed the charts, his unique voice and heartfelt lyrics winning over an ever-growing audience. Harper watched with pride as Cousin's name began to appear in music magazines, radio shows, and even small TV segments. She was by his side every step of the way, offering support, love, and an anchor amidst the whirlwind of nascent fame. One evening, after another successful concert, Kian and Harper were walking hand in hand through Central Park. The full moon bathed the path in silver light, creating an almost magical atmosphere. "You know," Kian said, stopping to look into Harper's eyes, "none of this would have been possible without you. Your love, your support. You are my inspiration, my strength." Harper felt her heart fill with love. "We're in this together, Kian. Your music touches people because it comes from a real place, from real experiences. Our love is part of that." Meanwhile, in Harper's parents' elegant home on the Upper East Side, a subtle change was beginning to take place. Bennett, sitting in his favorite armchair, was distractedly leafing through a business magazine when a familiar name caught his eye. "Rosalind," he called out to his wife, who was arranging some flowers in a nearby vase. "Have you seen this? There's an article here about Kian." Rosalind approached, curiosity overcoming her usual reserve. "What does it say?" Bennett read aloud, "Kian Johnson, the new jazz sensation, is redefining the genre with his innovative approach and deeply emotional lyrics. His debut single, Bridges of Love, has already topped the charts and is being hailed by critics as a modern masterpiece." Rosalind was silent for a moment, absorbing the words. He seems to be doing well," she finally said, her voice betraying a mixture of surprise and something that could be interpreted as reluctant pride. Bennett nodded slowly. Maybe we were hasty in our judgment," he admitted, the words coming out with difficulty. That evening, for the first time in months, Bennett picked up the phone and called Harper. The conversation was brief and a little awkward, but it was a start. He asked about Kian's success, expressed a genuine interest in finding out more about his career. Harper, surprised and touched by the call, felt a small flame of hope ignite in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, Kian's success was opening her parents' eyes beyond their prejudices. Meanwhile, in Harper's corporate world, things were also changing. The success of her latest campaign had caught the attention not only of her immediate superiors, but also of the agency's top executives. One Monday morning, Harper was called into the office of Thomas, her supervisor. Her heart racing, she entered the room, unsure of what to expect. "Harper," Thomas began, a genuine smile on his face, "your work on the last campaign was exceptional. You exceeded all expectations and impressed not only me, but the entire board." Harper felt a wave of pride and relief run through her body. "Thank you, Thomas. I really dedicated myself to this project. And it showed," Thomas continued. "That's why we're offering you a promotion. We want you to lead our new design innovation team." Harper was speechless for a moment, the realization that her hard work and talent were finally being recognized hitting her full force. I don't know what to say. Thank you for the opportunity. I promise I won't let you down." As she left Thomas' office, Harper noticed the looks on her colleagues' faces. Some were genuine admiration, others ill-concealed envy, but she held her head high, knowing that she had earned that position on her own merits. That evening, Harper and Kian got together to celebrate their achievements. In an elegant restaurant overlooking the New York skyline, they toasted success, love, and the barriers they had overcome together. To music that touches hearts and breaks down prejudices, Kian offered a toast, his eyes shining with love and pride. And to design that defies expectations and opens up new paths, Harper added, touching her glass to his. As they savored their meal, chatting animatedly about their plans for the future, Harper and Kian knew that they were living a crucial moment in their lives. The professional success they were both achieving was not just a personal victory, but living proof that talent, dedication, and love could overcome any barrier. The city glowed outside, a silent testament to the infinite possibilities that the future held. And there, in that moment of intimate celebration, Harper and Kian reaffirmed their commitment to each other and to the journey they had chosen to take together. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but now, strengthened by success and recognition, they were more prepared than ever to face them. The melody of their lives was just beginning to reach its crescendo, promising a symphony of love, fulfillment, and transformation that would echo far beyond their own existences. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of Harper and Kian's apartment, casting a golden glow over Harper's sleeping face. She opened her eyes slowly, feeling a familiar wave of nausea. Taking a deep breath, she sat up in bed, her hand instinctively resting on her still flat belly. Harper looked over at Kian, who was sleeping peacefully beside her. A soft smile formed on her lips as she contemplated how to tell him the news she had discovered the night before. After weeks of suspicion and a discreetly purchased pregnancy test, she was finally sure they were expecting a baby. Careful not to wake Kian, Harper got up and went to the kitchen. As she prepared breakfast, her mind wandered, imagining what her life would be like from now on. A mixture of excitement and apprehension invaded her. What would it be like to raise a child in a world that was still fighting prejudice? How would her parents react to the news? The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the apartment, and soon Kian appeared in the kitchen, his eyes still sleepy but with a warm smile on his lips. "Good morning, my love," he said, hugging Harper from behind and kissing her neck. Harper turned in his arms, looking deep into his eyes. "Kian, I have something to tell you." Kian noticed the seriousness in her voice and gently guided her to the kitchen table. "What is it, Harper? Is everything all right?" Harper took a deep breath, feeling her heart racing. "Kian, we're pregnant." For a moment, silence filled the kitchen. Kian remained motionless, his wide eyes fixed on Harper. Then slowly a smile began to form on his face, growing into a laugh of pure joy. "A baby? We're having a baby?" he exclaimed, pulling Harper into a tight hug. "Oh my God, Harper, this is wonderful." Tears of happiness streamed down Harper's face as she returned the hug. "Are you really happy? I mean, it's a big responsibility, and with our careers taking off." Kian pulled away slightly, holding Harper's face between his hands. "Harper, my love, nothing could make me happier than starting a family with you. Yes, it will be a challenge, but well, face it together, as we always have." In the months that followed, Harper and Kian found themselves on a roller coaster of emotions and preparations. Doctor's appointments, choosing a name, decorating the baby's room. Every moment was a new adventure, but it wasn't all flowers. The news of the pregnancy brought up old tensions with Harper's parents. When she called to tell them the news, their initial reaction was shock and silence. "Mom? Dad? Are you there?" Harper asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes, dear, we're here," Rosalind finally replied. "It's just that." "Well, it's a surprise." "A big surprise," Bennett added, his voice charged with conflicting emotions. Harper felt her heart squeeze. "I was hoping you'd be happy for us," she said softly. There was another moment of silence before Rosalind spoke again. "We are, dear. It's just, well, it's a big change. Are you sure you're ready for it?" The conversation ended on an uncertain note, leaving Harper with a knot in her stomach. Kian found her later, crying silently in the room they were preparing for the baby. "Hey, "Hey," he whispered, hugging her gently. "What happened?" Between sobs, Harper told him about her parents' reaction. Kian held her tight, his presence a safe haven in the midst of the emotional storm. "Harper, my love, give them time," Kian said softly. "Remember how they reacted to our relationship at the beginning, and see how things have changed. I'm sure that when they see our baby, they'll fall in love instantly." Kian's words brought comfort, but the shadow of uncertainty remained hanging over them for the next few months. As Harper's belly grew, Kian became increasingly protective and attentive. He attended every doctor's appointment, read books on parenthood, and spent hours talking to the baby still in her belly. One night, while Harper was resting on the sofa, Kian knelt down beside her, gently pressing his ear against her protruding belly. "Hey, little one," he whispered. "This is your father speaking. I can't wait to meet you. Know that you're already very much loved and that we'll do everything we can to make sure you grow up in a world full of love and acceptance." Harper felt tears of emotion form in her eyes as she watched the scene. At that moment, all her doubts and fears seemed insignificant in the face of the pure love she felt for her little family in the making. The big day arrived one fall morning. Harper woke up with strong contractions, and Kian, in a mixture of panic and excitement, rushed her to the hospital. The hours that followed were a mixture of pain, anxiety, and anticipation. "You're doing great, love," Kian whispered, holding Harper's hand tightly as she went through another contraction. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a baby's cry filled the delivery room. "It's a girl," announced the doctor, placing the tiny bundle in Harper's trembling arms. Harper and Kian stared in amazement at their newborn daughter. With skin the color of soft caramel, dark, curly hair, and eyes that promised to be as green as Harper's, little Zora was the perfect blend of her parents. "She's perfect," Kian whispered, tears streaming freely down his face. Over the next few days, Harper and Kian adapted to their new parenting routine. Sleepless nights, diapers to change, bottles to prepare. Each challenge was met with love and determination. It was during one of these nights, while Harper was breastfeeding Zora in the silence of the early hours, that the doorbell rang softly. Kian sleepily went to answer it, returning moments later with a surprised expression on his face. "Harper," he said softly, "your parents are here." Harper's heart raced as Bennett and Rosalind timidly entered the room. For a moment no one spoke. The only sound was the soft sucking of Zora feeding. Then slowly Rosalind approached, her eyes fixed on her granddaughter. "Oh, Harper," she whispered, her voice tinged with emotion. "She's beautiful." Bennett, standing a little way back, cleared his throat, visibly moved. Can we hold her?" Harper exchanged a glance with Kian, who nodded encouragingly. Carefully, she passed Zora into her grandmother's eager arms. The moment Rosalind held Zora for the first time was transformative. All the tension, all the prejudice that had marked the last few years seemed to melt away at the miracle of the new life in her arms. "Hello, little one," Rosalind whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your grandmother, and I already love you more than you can imagine." Bennett moved closer, slipping an arm around Rosalind and gently touching Zora's little hand. "And I'm your grandfather," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I promise, well, always be here for you." Harper and Kian watched the scene, their own tears flowing freely. At that moment, they felt that a new page was being turned in their family history. Zora's birth had not only brought a new life into the world, but also a new chance for healing and reconciliation. As the little family gathered around the baby, exchanging glances of love and acceptance, Harper felt a wave of hope and gratitude. The road had been difficult, marked by challenges and heartbreak, but love love for Kian, for Zora, and now renewed for her parents, had prevailed. There, in that hospital room with the rising sun casting a golden glow over them all, Harper knew they were at the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter of love, acceptance, and the beauty that comes when differences are celebrated, not feared. Zora, in her innocence and perfection, was living proof that true love knows no color, no prejudice. She was the future, a bright future full of possibilities, and together, as a united family, they were ready to face any challenge that came their way. The autumn sun cast a golden glow over the fallen leaves in the garden of Bennett and Rosalind Thompson's house. Harper, standing on the sidewalk with Zora in her arms and Kian by her side, felt her heart beating fast. It had been months since Zora's birth, and although her parents had shown a desire to reconcile at that moment in the hospital, things were still tense and uncertain. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Kian asked softly, his hand finding Harper's in a gesture of support. Harper took a deep breath, looking down at her sleeping daughter in her arms. Zora, with her dark curls and caramel-colored skin, was the embodiment of the love she and Kian shared. "I am," she replied, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "For Zora, for us. It's time to heal old wounds." They walked to the door and Harper hesitated for a moment before ringing the bell. The sound echoed through the house, and seconds later the door opened, revealing Rosalind. "Harper, darling," Rosalind said, her voice trembling slightly. Her eyes moved from Harper to Kian and finally to Zora. "Oh, come in, please." The tension was palpable as they entered the living room. Bennett was standing by the fireplace, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. "Hello, Dad," Harper said softly. Bennett nodded, his eyes fixed on Zora. "She's grown up," he commented, his voice hoarse. "Children have a habit of doing that," Kian replied with a gentle smile, trying to ease the tension. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Harper looked at her parents, noticing the worry lines on their faces, her father's hair grayer than she remembered. There was so much to be said, so many hurts to be healed. Harper began, her voice breaking. She looked at Kian, who nodded encouragingly. "We wanted to thank you for inviting us today. We know things have been difficult, but—" "Difficult?" Bennett interrupted, his voice heavy with emotion. "Harper, we almost lost you. We lost precious years because of our ignorance," Rosalind added softly, tears shining in her eyes. "Our ignorance and our prejudice." The silence that followed was deafening. Harper felt Zora stir in her arms, waking from her sleep. The little girl opened her eyes, her curious gaze roaming the room until it landed on Bennett and Rosalind. "Bah," Zora stammered, stretching out her arms towards her grandparents. That simple gesture seemed to break something inside Bennett. He took a hesitant step forward. Can I hold her?" Harper exchanged a glance with Kian before nodding, carefully passing Zora into her father's arms. Bennett held his granddaughter reverently, his eyes brimming with tears. "Hello, little one," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Your grandfather." Zora smiled, her small hands touching Bennett's face with curiosity. At that moment, something changed in the room. The tension began to dissipate, replaced by raw, honest emotion. Rosalind approached, gently touching Harper's arm. "My dear, we've made so many mistakes. We let our fears and prejudices blind us to what really mattered, your happiness." Harper felt the tears she had held back for so long begin to fall. "Mom, No, let me finish," Rosalind insisted gently. "Seeing you and Kian, seeing the beautiful family you've created, we realized how wrong we were. The love you share, The love you have for Zora is purer and truer than anything we've ever seen." Bennett, still holding Zora, joined the conversation. "Kian," he said, turning to his son-in-law, "I owe you my sincerest apologies. I judged you unfairly based on nothing but ignorance and prejudice. I now see the man you are, the loving father, the devoted husband. I hope that one day you can forgive me." Kian, visibly moved, held out his hand to Bennett. "Mr. Thompson." "Bennett, the past is the past. What matters is the future we can build together, as a family." Kian's words seemed to break down the last barriers. Rosalind hugged Harper, sobbing openly. "Forgive me, my child. Please, forgive me." Harper returned the embrace, years of hurt and resentment dissolving into tears of relief and forgiveness. "I love you, Mom. I love you both." The afternoon passed in a mixture of tears, laughter, and long-delayed conversations. Harper and Kian shared stories about Zora, about their work, about the challenges and joys of their life together. Bennett and Rosalind listened attentively, asking questions, genuinely interested in getting to know the life their daughter had built. At one point, while Rosalind was playing with Zora on the living room carpet, Bennett pulled Kian into a corner. "You know," he began, his voice low and sincere, "when Harper first told us about you, I was afraid. Not of you, specifically, but of the world, of what people would say, of the challenges you'd face." Kian nodded, understanding. "It's a natural fear, I suppose. But now," Bennett continued, "I see that my fear was unfounded. You faced those challenges with grace and strength. You've built a beautiful life together, and Zora, she's living proof that love knows no color or prejudice." Kian felt a lump in his throat. "Thank you, Bennett. That means a lot to me, to us." Across the room, Harper watched the interaction between her father and her husband, her heart overflowing with emotion. She joined her mother and Zora on the carpet. "She has your eyes," Rosalind commented softly, stroking Zora's curls. Harper smiled, and Kian smiled. "And the heart of both of you," Rosalind added, her eyes meeting Harper's, a heart full of love and forgiveness. As night began to fall, Harper and Kian prepared to leave. The farewell was emotional, so different from the tension that had marked their arrival. "Are you coming next weekend?" Rosalind asked hopefully. "We could have a family lunch." Harper looked at Kian, who smiled and nodded. "We'd love to," she replied. As they drove away from the house, Zora asleep in Kian's arms, Harper felt a peace she hadn't experienced for years. The road to reconciliation hadn't been easy, but every difficult step, every painful conversation, had been worth it. "Are you okay?" Kian asked softly, noticing Harper's distant gaze. She smiled, tears of happiness shining in her eyes. "More than fine. I feel like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders, like we can finally breathe freely." Kian kissed her forehead affectionately. "It's a new beginning for all of us." As they walked under the starry autumn sky, Harper reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Their love had been tested, challenged, and, at times, almost broken. But in the end, that same love had proved stronger than prejudice, deeper than differences, more enduring than fear. Reconciliation with her parents was not the end of the story, Harper knew. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. There would be more challenges ahead, more difficult conversations, more moments of growth and learning. But now, with her family reunited and healed, Harper felt ready to face anything. The future, once uncertain and sometimes frightening, now shone with promises of love, acceptance, and togetherness. And that night, walking hand in hand with Kian, her daughter sleeping peacefully in his arms, Harper knew they had found something truly precious, a home where love transcended all barriers. Autumn in New York painted the city in shades of red and gold, the leaves falling softly on the busy streets. Bennett Thompson watched from the window of his office on the top floor of his house, his mind wandering over the events of the last few weeks. The family reunion, the reconciliation with Harper and Kian, Zora's innocent smile, all this caused deep reflection in his heart. With a sigh, Bennett turned away from the window and walked over to his favorite armchair. On the side table, a framed photo caught his eye. It was a picture of Harper as a child, her smile bright and carefree. He picked up the picture frame, feeling the weight of years of regret. "How could I have been so blind?" he muttered to himself, his fingers tracing the outline of his daughter's smiling face on the photograph. From downstairs, he could hear Rosalind humming softly as she tidied the house. The melody, a lullaby she used to sing to Harper, brought tears to Bennett's eyes. How many precious moments had they lost because of his prejudice? Determined, Bennett got up and went downstairs. He found Rosalind in the kitchen, organizing the dishes for the family lunch they had planned for the weekend. "Darling," he called softly, making Rosalind turn around. "Yes, Bennett," she replied, noticing the emotion in her husband's eyes. "I think we need to talk," he said, pulling out a chair and sitting down at the kitchen table. Rosalind nodded, joining him. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened," Bennett began, his voice heavy with emotion. "About how we treated Harper and Kian, about the time we lost." Rosalind reached out, taking Bennett's hand. "Me too, darling. I've been reliving every moment, every harsh word we said." "We were so foolish, Rosalind," Bennett continued, tears now streaming freely down his face. "We let our fears and prejudices blind us to what really mattered, our daughter's happiness." Rosalind nodded, her own eyes watering. "I ask myself every day how we could have been so cruel. Harper has always been a strong, determined girl. We should have trusted her judgment, her heart." "And Kian," Bennett added, shaking his head. "What an extraordinary man he is. Talented, kind, a devoted father and husband. How could we not have seen that before?" "Fear blinds us, Bennett," Rosalind said softly. "It makes us see threats where there is only love." They were silent for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts and regrets. It was Bennett who finally broke the silence. "We need to do things right, Rosalind. We can't change the past, but we can build a better future. For Harper, for Kian, for Zora, and for ourselves." Rosalind squeezed Bennett's hand, a soft smile on her lips. "You're right. It's time to truly embrace our family with all the love we have in our hearts." That afternoon, Bennett made a long overdue phone call. His heart racing, he dialed Kian's number. "Hello?" Kian's voice sounded on the other end of the line. "Kian, it's Bennett," he said, his voice shaking slightly. I was wondering if we could meet up, just the two of us." There was a pause on the other end, and Bennett feared he had made a mistake. But then, "Sure, Bennett," Kian replied, his voice warm. "How about coffee tomorrow?" The next day, Bennett met Kian in a small cafe in the city center. The place was quiet, perfect for the conversation Bennett knew they needed to have. "Thanks for coming, Kian," Bennett said, holding out his hand. Kian shook it firmly, a gentle smile on his face. "It's good to see you, Bennett." They sat down, ordering coffee. For a moment, silence hung between them, laden with years of misunderstandings and unspoken hurts. "Kian," Bennett began, his voice breaking. I need to apologize. For everything. For the way I treated you. For the things I said and thought." Kian raised his hand, gently interrupting him. "Bennett, the past is the past. What's important is that we're here now, trying to build something new." Bennett shook his head, tears shining in his eyes. "You're very generous, Kian. More than I deserve. I was so unfair to you, so blind." "Prejudice is a powerful thing," Kian said softly. "It makes us see the world through distorted lenses. But the fact that we're here today, having this conversation, shows that love and understanding can overcome even the most ingrained prejudices." Bennett looked at Kian, seeing him truly for the first time. He saw the strength in his eyes, the kindness in his smile, the wisdom in his words. "You love my daughter," Bennett said, "not a question, but a realization." Kian smiled, his face lighting up. "More than words can express. Harper is my partner, my best friend, my inspiration, and Zora, she's the best of both of us." Bennett felt his heart fill with an emotion he couldn't name. It was a mixture of joy, regret, and hope. "I was a fool, Kian," he said, his voice trembling. "An old fool full of prejudices. But seeing you together, seeing the family you've built, I understand now. Love knows no color, no barriers. And you too, you have something special." Kian reached out, touching Bennett's arm. "It's never too late to learn, to grow. What matters is that we're here now, building bridges instead of walls." They talked for hours, Bennett listening with fascination to Kian's stories about his musical career, about the challenges he had faced, about his love for Harper and Zora. When they finally said goodbye, Bennett felt as if a huge weight had been lifted off his shoulders. "Thank you, Kian," he said, his voice heavy with emotion, "for your patience, for your forgiveness, for being the man my daughter deserves." Kian smiled, pulling Bennett into an unexpected but welcome hug. "We're family now, Bennett, and family takes care of each other." That evening at home, Bennett shared with Rosalind the details of his conversation with Kian. Together they reflected on the road they had traveled, the lessons they had learned, and the future that was now opening up before them. "You know," Rosalind said softly, "maybe all this suffering, all this journey was necessary to make us grow, to teach us the true meaning of love and acceptance." Bennett nodded, taking his wife's hand. "You're right. And now we have the chance to do things right, to be the parents, the grandparents that Harper and Zora deserve." As the sun set over New York, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Bennett and Rosalind Thompson felt a peace they hadn't experienced for years. The road to redemption was long and sometimes painful, but each step brought them closer to their family, to a deeper and truer love. And somewhere in the city, Harper and Kian were lulling their daughter to sleep, unaware of the transformation taking place in Bennett and Rosalind's hearts. But the universe was smiling, knowing that the bridges of love and understanding were being rebuilt, promises of a bright future for the whole family. The summer sun bathed Central Park in golden light, the trees swaying gently in the warm breeze. In the heart of the park, a small clearing had been transformed into a party scene. Colorful balloons danced in the air, decorative ribbons snaked between the trees, and a large banner proclaimed, "Happy Birthday, Zora." Harper watched the scene with a smile on her lips, her heart overflowing with joy. Zora, now 3 years old, was running across the lawn, her dark curls bouncing with every step, her infectious laughter echoing through the air. Kian was by her side, filming every precious moment with his camera. "I can't believe she's already 3, Harper whispered, feeling her eyes water. Kian lowered the camera, pulling Harper close. "Time flies, doesn't it? It seems like yesterday that we brought her home for the first time." Harper nodded, leaning back against Kian's chest. Together they watched their daughter play, amazed at the pure, innocent joy she radiated. On the other side of the clearing, Bennett and Rosalind arrived, laden with presents and with broad smiles on their faces. The last few years had brought about a remarkable transformation in the couple. Their love for Zora had melted away the last barriers of prejudice, replacing them with warm acceptance and genuine affection. "Grandpa! Grandma!" Zora shouted, running towards her grandparents with open arms. Bennett knelt down, welcoming his granddaughter into a tight embrace. "Happy birthday, my little princess," he said, his voice tinged with emotion. Rosalind joined in the hug, planting kisses on Zora's rosy cheeks. "We've brought you presents, darling." Zora's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Presents? Can I open them now?" Harper and Kian approached, laughing at their daughter's anxiety. "After the cake, love," Harper said gently. "First, let's wait for all the guests to arrive." Little by little, the park filled up with friends and family. Harper's work colleagues, musicians who played with Kian, neighbors who had become close friends over the years. It was a colorful and joyful mix of people, all united to celebrate little Zora. As the children played and the adults chatted, Harper couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them there. She remembered the initial struggles, the tears shed, the moments of doubt, but she also remembered the strength they had found in each other, the love that had sustained them through the most difficult times. "What are you thinking about?" Kian asked softly, noticing Harper's distant gaze. "Everything," she replied with a smile. "About how we got here, how blessed we are." Kian nodded, understanding perfectly. He too felt the magnitude of the moment, the beauty of seeing his family united and happy. The moment for the cake arrived, and everyone gathered around the decorated table. Zora, sitting in the chair of honor, could hardly contain her excitement. The cake, a work of art in itself, was decorated with musical notes and paintbrushes, reflecting Kian and Harper's passions. As everyone sang happy birthday, Harper looked around, her heart filling with gratitude. She saw her daughter's radiant face, Kian's sparkling eyes, his parents' proud smiles. She saw friends who had become family, colleagues who had become loyal supporters. As the song ended and Zora prepared to blow out the candles, Kian raised his hand, asking for everyone's attention. "Before we cut the cake," he said, his voice heavy with emotion, "I'd like to say a few words." An expectant silence fell over the group. Kian looked at Harper, then at Zora, and finally at Bennett and Rosalind before continuing. 3 years ago, when Zora was born, our lives changed forever. She brought a light so bright, a love so pure, that it illuminated even the darkest corners of our lives. He paused, taking a deep breath. But Zora did more than just make us parents. She brought us together in ways we never imagined possible. His eyes met those of Bennett and Rosalind. She taught us that true love knows no barriers, sees no color, doesn't care about differences. She showed us that family is more than blood. It's choice, it's commitment, it's forgiveness. Harper felt tears run down her face, seeing that she was not alone. Many of those present were also visibly moved. "I look at all of you here today," Kian continued, "and I see a family, not just by blood, but by love, acceptance, and understanding. Each of you has played a role in our journey, supporting us, challenging us to be better, loving us unconditionally." He turned to Zora, who was watching him with wide, curious eyes. "And you, my little star, you are the center of it all. You teach us every day about love, about joy, about seeing the world with new and amazed eyes." Kian raised his glass, and all those present imitated him. "So, let's drink a toast. To Zora, for 3 years of love and joy, to family in all its shapes and colors, and to the future, bright and full of possibilities. To Zora," everyone exclaimed in unison, glasses clinking in the sunny park air. As Zora blew out the candles, making a secret wish, Harper felt Kian wrap an arm around her waist. Across the table, Bennett and Rosalind watched them with smiles of approval and love. The rest of the afternoon passed in a mixture of laughter, games, and animated conversation. Zora opened her presents with childlike enthusiasm, each new toy or book received with exclamations of joy. As the sun began to set, tinting the sky pink and orange, the guests began to say goodbye. Harper and Kian, with Zora asleep in their father's arms, stayed behind to help clean up. Bennett approached Kian, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Son," he said, his voice heavy with emotion, "I want you to know how proud I am of you, of the father you are, of the man you've become. Thank you for not giving up on us, even when we didn't deserve a second chance." Kian felt a lump in his throat. "Family doesn't give up on each other," he replied simply. Rosalind, who had joined them, hugged Harper tightly. "My dear, you've built something so beautiful here. A family full of love and acceptance. I'm so happy to be a part of it." Harper returned the hug, feeling years of hurt and resentment dissolve completely. "I love you, Mom. I love you all." As they walked home under the starry New York sky, Harper reflected on the journey that had brought them there. The challenges faced, the tears shed, the moments of doubt and fear. But she also remembered the strength they had found in each other, the love that had sustained them through the most difficult times. Looking at Kian, who carried a sleeping Zora in his arms, and at her parents, who were walking hand in hand just behind, Harper felt a wave of gratitude and love so intense that it almost took her breath away. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support inspires us to bring new, exciting stories. Support the channel by clicking the link in the first comment or scanning the QR code on your screen. Share this story with someone special and leave a comment about what you'd like to see next. Get ready for the amazing story that is unfolding on your screen right now.